We've come together to advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals and particularly SDG 4.7 in England by 2030. We work collaboratively and voluntarily with everyone involved coming from a variety of organisations, all donating their time with the aim of equipping our society to create a more sustainable, fairer, peaceful and resilient world. Introducing our speakers formally in a second, but each of our speakers, Phoebe, Desiree and Sam, will be giving their perspectives on the strategy. Before we get into that, Anne Finlayson is going to start us off with an overview and insights into the strategy. Anne is Executive Chair of SEED and Co-Chair of Our Shared World. She brings with her a vast wealth of experience in the education and sustainability sectors and an inspirational drive and passion for environmental education. She's been advising the Department for Education on the current sustainability strategy, and she's now going to tell us more about what it entails. So thanks, Anne, over to you.
You're welcome, thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Holly. Yes, I am remarkably old, and I've had a lot of interviews, phone calls with some people from the Department of Education who have been amazed at things I know, and I do keep telling them that I'm old and I've been around a long time. But my favourite thing was when they said, oh, this is the first sustainability strategy for the Department of Education. I said, let me just stop you there. It is the fifth. And they went, oh yeah, sorry. And I said, well, I've got the other four if you want to see them, but they weren't interested. Anyway, all I've done is I've, in my conversations with them, and I'm on a user group, so in the various meetings and phone calls, I've just pulled together some key points, but I would strongly recommend that you read the strategy. I would also strongly recommend that, before we get critical of the consultation process, there are ways in, and it is not the same as sending out a questionnaire in July and no one's there to answer the questionnaire and they end up with 35 responses. This is not going to be that same sort of ball game at all. And I know Sarah Collins from Forest Schools has had conversations with various people. I know others have written in, so there are lots of ways to do this. So some key points. First of all, this vision statement, which is quite crucial. The United Kingdom is the world leading education sector in sustainability and climate change. The world leading bit is the crucial bit. There are ways of finding out more, and encourage you to read this. So the Secretary of State for Education was quite new in the job when this was launched. So he may be getting up to speed, but there are other junior ministers who have been assigned various parts of it. You can download the strategy here. And then very interestingly is the Nature Park video, which you can find on Twitter, where Professor Dasgupta, who you may know has did the economics study of biodiversity and was very interested in environmental ed. Didn't get to do much in the final report, but he's managed to speak a little bit online with them and on this video, so it's worth listening to. Just to let you know what this consultation process is, all right? So they began last March, as far as I'm aware, and I've been told with an experts panel. I don't know who was on it. I know one person who was on it. And they together produced some draft ideas and a draft strategy that was then reworked for COP26, I think with ministers' input, and some of the people felt that their ideas had been lost, but I think it's all in the final delivery in the end. There was a soft launch at the Natural History Museum, and then this hard launch at COP26, and it's a draft for consultation until the end of March. But it's a long working process, really. In the consultation, they've had 5 working groups that match the 4 action areas and a data group. And they were all invited for a week in December to respond to the strategy. There was also a youth panel meeting and the user group. I'm part of the user group. The working group's work was finished in that week. They only met the once, but the youth panel and the user group will continue certainly until the end of March, and maybe longer when they'll review the governance of this strategy. So it's really important that, you know, I'm there as a rep of SEED and our shared world, that I understand what you as a group of stakeholders would like to say. Many people have written in. For example, Bill Scott, Professor Bill Scott's written in and he got a reply. You can still write in. The final strategy will be April this year. Key points on the consultation. They are looking for gaps, opportunities, how to facilitate successful delivery on action areas. They want positive sector-wide engagement and continuous improvement. This all sounds very familiar to me. It sounds very similar to the Sustainable Schools Initiative when that first came out. But they do want to know about challenges and they do want to know about potential risks. And they are beginning to identify potential partners, including funding streams. I have been told there's money, but they say there's no money. So I don't really know what the true story is there. They will not consider feedback on the overarching vision and aims of the strategy, the strategic aims. That's set. They're also not very interested in adding to the national curriculum. Now, I've been told that. They haven't said that themselves, but and when I'm saying what I mean is I've been talking to the civil servants whose job it is to try and finalize this strategy. If you haven't read the strategy, I honestly strongly recommend that you do, because there is actually a lot in it and you do really have to put your thinking hats on. This page is probably the best summary of it all, where the strategic aim, the 4 aims are here that come underneath the vision statement. They've identified 5 action areas: climate education, green skills, education estate, operation and supply, and this National Education, Nature Park and Climate Leaders Award. And then all of these are supposed to lead to the strategic aim. So it's a bit like a theory of change diagram or a logical framework, but I'm not sure about the logic in some of these links myself. They've got some key messages that it's really worth hearing, because this is what's driving what they're doing. Their guiding principles are partnership and collaboration, evidence and insight, and leadership and support. And this statement, sector representatives called on the department to provide greater leadership in sustainability. We will intervene where we add value, for example, through sector-wide data gathering, reporting, funding, and guidance. But wherever possible, we'll facilitate autonomy and encourage innovation. That's directly from the strategy. So there's some other key, there's some other key messages in there. It is for Department of Education and its arm's length bodies, and it's from everything from early years, social care, school, FE, all the way up to HE. The focus is environmental sustainability. This is a word that I struggle with. You know, you'd think I wouldn't, but I do. I have no idea what they mean by that, but I think it's very, very specific. I can't see how you can do environmental sustainability without thinking about society as well, to be honest. In the strategy, they've got short, medium, and long-term actions, and their vision is up to 2030. They've got things for 2022, 2023, 2025, and 2030. They've got the 4 strategic aims. Key thing that they're saying is they're doing a whole system approach. So this is about the whole education system, and they want to be about sharing best practice, evidence, and resources. They don't seem very keen on whole institution approach or a whole school approach. I'm not quite sure why, except I think they think it takes away from whole system approach. But the route map, to me, is starting to look like a whole school or whole institution approach. They want innovative and transformative ideas. Buzzwords, I know. I think it'd be really important to help them understand what is actually innovative when some of this work has been going on for 30, 40 years. And what is transformative? How do you actually measure transformative? And they are actually joining up. You know, having been the commissioner on the Sustainable Development Commission, this is a bit of joy for me. they are joining up other bits of government, which, is a rare thing. So there's this Access to Outdoors Commission, there's the DfE Environment Bill, there's a disruptive review of economics of biodiversity, there's the government's UK net zero strategy. So just to remind you again, because this is the page that we'll be working on, but in a easier to use format with all of these boxes. What for me is so interesting is these lines between. And I realize that one of them, more young people have better physical and mental health, just ends there. It's not a strategic aim, doesn't link into anything else, but it just ends there. Other things show you the thinking behind it. So the green skills and careers, if you read the boxes, it's very much about jobs in probably the renewable energy business. And the impact on young people, with more young people have access to green jobs and careers, and that's apparently going to lead us to net zero. Lovely. But there are some interesting words in here about young people having lived experience, young people understanding inputs of reducing waste and making sustainable choices. How they do that without some learning or education in this operations and supply chain, I don't know. More young people spend time in and have greater connection to nature and understand its value. But there are other ones where young people are taking action, learning to adapt. So there's actually embedded in there potentially quite a lot of education. I thought you might want to just look at the climate education thing. This is just their goals for 2022. And you will see that there's, the focus is on teacher training, and they're talking about qualifications, but they're also talking about specific support and teachers. Quite a lot of this is based on science. Unfortunately, they've gone with the idea of champions. I mean, I could scream at that one, but I'm not going to, because we just know that doesn't work. They get burnt out. This is for everyone. They've talked about effective evidence-based climate education is already taking place, and they want that evidence, and they want people to work with them. There's FE and there's HE. And then in 2023, they're hoping to align with the UNESCO ESD framework. Then they've got goals for 2025 and goals for 2030, which is the whole strategy. I got a call from a group who are doing the international agenda, and I thought they've got the wrong person. I'm not the person doing the international agenda. And I read through the whole strategy again. I thought, I don't know what this means. And then I thought, oh no, it's the words world leading. And when we had the meeting, it is the words world leading. So you know what, that's okay. And they obviously want to have this whole system approach because they're thinking about, their reputation and their impact. A bit sad because, we were leading the world, and I know this because people at UNESCO and people from other countries told me this. We were leading the world in terms of ESD and global citizenship up to 2010, and it's been a shock to people that we weren't continuing with that after that. Whether we can get back to that and whether we want to lead the world is another question. This international group, lovely people, they want to create some events and workshops to find where these areas of practice are so that they could be world leading, but also to build on. And they want to be able to present at COP27. So, that's not that far away. They're very keen on green skills, teacher training, and ed tech as part of this international agenda. And I think they're thinking that is a trade, those will be tradable products. That's what I get as a feeling. But they're also quite keen on the idea of biodiversity mapping in the nature park. I don't really understand more than that. That's all I've got on that one. When we were in the consultations in the user group, we got feedback from the youth panel, but I'm pretty certain our two young people today here, Phoebe and Trizzy, will be able to tell us a bit more. But you can see some really sensible feedback from the youth panel. There was one on the teacher training side. This is the feedback from them. From both of these, I've got the sense that it's not more resources that are needed, but how do you quality assure and how do you ensure that the resources are the ones that will lead to innovation and transformation? So what does the roadmap show? We are going to explore it, and we're going to look at each action area, and I'm going to ask you the question, does that action area lead to the strategic aim? Because that's the direction of the arrows. Your task is to think about the gaps, opportunities, your expertise, which you might call best practice, you might not, evidence, challenges, and risks that you see. So keep those in mind. And in the last half hour of this session, we will be gathering your thoughts on stickies in facilitated breakout groups. So just to give you another quick look at it, and then we are about to move on. I'm 2 minutes ahead of myself. Did I speak too fast? Sorry about that. So just have a glance over that for the next 2 minutes before we move on, and reflect on that and think about where might you put a sticky, you know, where have you got some evidence or some practice or some thoughts, you know, things that you think are gaps, opportunities, challenges. Just have a glance through that and look at the way this diagram is structured and where you might contribute. What I find really interesting is that these 4 strategic aims are all supposed to feed into each other. They're supposed to support each other. And that might be a question you have. You might have a question about how your action area, climate education, with some of the stuff I've just mentioned, and the activities, do those activities lead to those outcomes? Do those outcomes lead to that impact on young people? And does that lead to excellence in education and skills for a changing world? Which is SDG 4. And what we're interested in is SDG 4.7. So it's really, is that the way that you would get to 4.7? Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Anne. So I'm going to pass over to Ellie now. I think he's going to introduce our speakers.
Apologies, hope you can hear me. Unexpectedly having to present from an ice skating rink. So very exciting. It's a bit on the chilly side. We've been experiencing a lot of chilly weather for the last few days, haven't we? So apologies for background noise. I'm delighted to be able to introduce our youth speakers for today, 2 very active members of Teach the Future, Phoebe Hanson and CPD. For those of you that don't know, but I'm sure you are aware, they're a youth-led campaign. They are championing for an urgent repurposing of the education system around climate and ecological emergency. So some youth voices coming through from Phoebe and CPD. Thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Okay, fantastic. So me and CPD might overlap a little bit in what we're saying, but what we're essentially thinking at Teach the Future on the Department for Education Climate Sustainability Strategy is that it's a very good thing. It contains a lot of commitments that we've been calling for, which include like the new professional teaching qualification. It's got some new commitments on vocational skills. It's got a program to increase connection to nature in the nature park. And all new schools built from 2023 will be net zero carbon, which is absolutely fantastic. And there's partial commitments to reskilling existing teachers, to producing new teaching resources, and to working with schools on leadership and local coordination. But I think as much as there is a lot of commitments in the climate sustainability strategy, it also fell short in many areas. And what Anne, I think, drew on a little bit is that there is a complete lack of reference to changes in the curriculum in the strategy for the Department for Education. They're not really focusing on education a whole lot. And what I think is interesting, actually, and we might need to connect with you, Anne, on this, is that we're getting a slightly different line from the DfE civil servants on the, like, what is holding them back from making changes to the curriculum. What we've been hearing is that there's a little bit of a stopgap in the sense that the DfE curriculum team there is not enough evidence that there isn't climate being included within the curriculum to make full changes to the national curriculum and to what is being taught within schools. So we're kind of going at it from a little bit of a different angle. For me, I didn't do geography in school. I didn't do separate sciences. And my climate education was a page in a textbook. It was not anything that is going to inspire me as somebody that wasn't a geographer, wasn't a scientist, to be able to actually be a part of a green industrial revolution or to be part of any kind of green economy or green workforce. Because the education that I had was something that, when I saw those headlines coming up in the news about climate change, it's something that paralyzed me in a sense. It made you full of terror and anxiety, and it made you think that this is an issue that's so big that you could never even hope to understand it, never mind to be a part of the solution. And that's shocking. And I am the daughter of a teacher. I spent most of my life in a school. We always used to joke that I spent more time at school than at home because I went to the primary school that my mum taught at. And even the amount of time that I spent in a school building, even the amount of time that I spent around teachers, I was not equipped with the skills to be able to fully adapt and fully be a part of the solution to the climate emergency, that we've all declared, and we've established that we're in a climate crisis. Climate change has to be integrated into every subject for that reason, because every student deserves to know about climate change. Every student needs to know this. Every student needs to be taught in a way that engages them and that relates to the future job that they will have. And that future job that, although not in geography and although not in science, will have to be a green job to be a part of that green industrial revolution. So to do that, we at Teach the Future believe that the Department for Education should set up some kind of independent review to come up with practical ways that they can integrate sustainability into every subject, and that should be a part of the sustainability strategy that they launched at COP26. And what we think is quite interesting also is that the Education and Environment Ministers Summit that happened at COP26, it convened like education and environment ministers from loads of different countries. I think pledges on climate education from 23 different countries. And that's where they launched the sustainability strategy. The Secretary of State for Education did a keynote address there, and they committed to integrated climate education in that address, in that statement. But in the actual strategy, there is not much that follows through on that. There is not much that actually follows through on having integrated climate education into every part of the curriculum. And that is important, not just from the student standpoint, it's important from the teacher standpoint, because teachers, I think, are at a breaking point. My mum, I know, is at a breaking point. I don't think I've ever known my mum to not be burnt out, because instead of actually adding things into the curriculum as it is and adding things into the school system as it is, things are tacked onto the side, and their funding is cut, so staff is cut, so they have less capacity. But there's more and more stuff that is added, and they're still teaching the same things that they were a decade ago. They're still teaching the same amount of content, but things are being added onto the side that are just little extracurricular things. And I think we worry that with the sustainability strategy, that there's a lot that's extracurricular and there's a lot that's optional. And without climate education, without climate being mandatory within the curriculum, and by that we mean not just mandatory for like the students, but mandatory in the sense that it is integrated within that block that teachers are teaching. So they have the capacity to be able, like the slotted time to be able to deal with that. Because otherwise, if we keep tacking things onto the side, teachers are never going to be able to teach in a way that is fully engaging to the students that they're teaching. And they're never going to express to students how much this is a critical issue, because it will be taught like to engage with in school. And I think it's exactly because of that too that we need to engage the educators and the teachers in that process. And we were delighted when we were doing those consultations, both, I don't think Fizzer is on the youth panel, but I'm on the youth panel for the Department for Education's Climate and Sustainability Strategy. Those consultations engage teachers and engage young people, and that's really, really critical. If we don't have teachers as a part of this, if we don't have a teacher actually engaging within the consultation process and helping co-design that strategy, it's never going to be a strategy that is actually ingrained within the reality of what schools are like nowadays and what teachers are experiencing, and are never things that are going to be actually engaging to the young people that they're teaching and to the teachers that are actually teaching it. It needs to be engaged through absolutely everybody. And that, I think, is that is critical for the strategy that they're developing now. That's also critical when it comes to, there was something about a non-executive director on climate within the Department of Education. We need to have youth on the panel for that, for deciding who that will be. We also need to have youth on the panel for deciding who will be the company that deliver the Duke of Edinburgh style award. I've forgotten what it's called, the Climate Leaders Award. And the nature park. You need to be on the panel to decide who's going to be delivering that, because otherwise it would be a company that, like, we need to make sure that everything that we do is done with and through young people and with and through teachers, because otherwise this is never going to work. It's never going to be something that's fully implemented. That's quite a garbled response to the sustainability strategy, but I'll pass on to Fizz.
I wouldn't say it was garbled at all, Phoebe. I'd say that I've seen loads of people nodding in the gallery and people adding to the chat about this sense of eco-anxiety being created in young people, and a move towards transformative pedagogies, and just in agreement with you, Phoebe, this, not it being tacked on, but it being integrated, and this sense of it being a voluntary sort of extracurricular thing that people might do. Thank you so much. As Matt's put there, very clear and inspiringly passionate. Thank you, Phoebe. Fizzer, are you happy to continue this discussion with us and share your thoughts on the draft policy?
So I'm gonna focus on a couple of things, especially net zero. And so the draft that we've been given is that our net zero is going to be reliant on the SALIX BEIS public sector decarbonisation scheme for retrofitting grants, but we've kind of said that this isn't really well suited to the requirements of state schools, and that it only funds 64% of measures needed, which leads to about a £250 million shortfall each year. So, but the sooner we implement these measures, the sooner that we have like more money put into this, and the greater the carbon savings and the less we're fueling global heating. The Department of Education needs to commit working with the EIS and the Treasury to make the PSDS scheme for education providers. So it scopes the whole of the retrofitting of schools. Given the importance of subliminal curriculum and learning about low carbon living, the strategy should position climate education buildings towards the front of the queue for retrofitting, ideally with them all being retrofitted by 2030. We have two further strategy-wide issues that we'd like the DfE to address, and that there is no measurable targets in this draft strategy, although there are commitments to set measurable targets for the periods 2025 to 2030. We would like to see the draft targets being developed during the period of consultation with stakeholder groups. Whilst the strategy includes recognition of student leadership, it also states, importantly, while schools should support people interested in climate change and tackling both its causes and effects, it would not be appropriate to encourage pupils to join specific campaigning groups or engage in specific political activities such as protests. And we understand that this has likely been included to acknowledge the legal requirements of the Education Act, and probably to reassure some sceptical MPs. However, it feels dismissive of the impact of the youth climate movement, of which we are a part, and campaigns like Fridays for Future and Teach the Future, which continue to play a vital role in driving meaningful climate action by civic society. It feels out of place in a strategic document, as if it were advice to school leaders. It sends out the wrong signals working in tertiary education, especially universities, where student participation in environmental and climate justice clubs, societies, and charities should be encouraged as part of the student experience. Campaigns also have an important role in developing critical thinking skills, agency, and they tend to be interdisciplinary, all of which should be acknowledged rather than dismissed. So that's roughly what Teach the Future say about the net zero targets. So personally with me, climate, I believe that, our asks haven't really been entirely met, and that even though we encourage this plan, obviously more work needs to be done, especially in terms of curriculum, in terms of actually setting like meaningful goals that are there and in place, and the government are going to be able to meet, which under the current framework, unfortunately, won't be able to. That we don't have any commitment to what's being taught in higher education. And there are similar concerns at tertiary education, especially in economics, political and business studies, with students telling us much of what we were taught reinforces unsustainable thinking and business as usual, as university should be a place where we challenge ideas and we challenge what is set in stone. And so this, not being taught sustainable thinking and how to bring in like decarbonisation and sustainability into our business courses, our political courses, and our economic courses. These are the people who are going to be, moving on into the world, and there's no challenge of ideas there, which is disappointing. So we believe that the subject-specific training and support for teachers is review subject-specific training and support for teachers at all levels so they are equipped to deliver a knowledge-rich curriculum and improve climate education. Science contributing professional development for school teachers will include climate change and sustainability. So that's from the draft proposal. And so that kind of is good for the idea that teachers don't believe that they are taught enough about the climate crisis to be able to teach about it. So they're apprehensive, they don't know the facts, and some perceive it as a political issue because it's linked to how society is run. And so teaching can be inaccurate and misleading. Specifically, like I personally have had teachers tell me that climate change isn't like real because they don't know everything behind it, they don't know the facts behind it, and they're misinformed. So they just tell an entire class of students that climate change isn't real, and that's been going on for like basically all of my education. Mandatory training combined with the proposed initiatives for trainee teachers would ensure that all educators